breaking news.
Former President Donald Trump will face criminal charges over hush money payments allegedly made to an adult film actress. Here is a live look outside of Trump Tower in New York. The former president is expected to turn himself in to the police next week. This is the first time in American history that a current or former president will face criminal charges.
And it comes as the former president ramps up his third bid for the White House. Our chief political reporter Amanda Rooker in studio tonight with Republican strategist David Oman. Amanda?
Stacey, James, thank you. David, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
As a former Republican Party of Iowa co-chair, as a Republican strategist, we're seeing a former president facing criminal charges. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is history. Now, is it good history or bad history? It's probably going to break along political lines. I think there are a lot of Republicans who have baked in the fact that this was coming out of New York City, and they're dismissive of this. We ought to see what's in the indictment. Is it smoke or is it fire?
Well, that's something that we've been hearing about, this looming indictment, for a while, and people have been calling it political. There's been building scrutiny over it, but part of that is that the former president is seeking re-election. How does this impact the presidential election campaign? Does this help Trump politically, or does it hurt him?
Well, it's a little early, 1 hour in to make a big assessment of all this. Look, all of the survey, all of the anecdotal information, all that we've talked about suggests that 25 to 30% of the Republicans are really hardcore Trump voters. There may be another 20% who might think about him. And this indictment, how it plays out, what he says, and what the ultimate decision is, could change that part. But I think the people who are die-hard Trump people who weathered everything else are probably going to stick with him.
What about Republicans who see this as a political attack on the Republican Party? Does that help Trump at all in his quest for the Republican nomination, or does this, make Republicans see him as a candidate that's plagued by legal drama?
Well, again, I think the people who have seen all that we've all seen for the last 7+ years, most of them will stay with him. I think there's a larger Republican family, and beyond that, a concentric circle of independents who actually decide the general election, who are going to wait and see. And they're also, by the way, going to take a look at who the other Republican candidates are. I don't think it will slow them down as they begin to introduce themselves to Iowa. We're blessed here, we get the first look.
Well, like you mentioned, it's still incredibly early. There is a lot of reaction and analysis to come on this. I'm sure we will continue to talk about this for a long while. David, thanks for joining us.
We'll have many more conversations, that's right.
Well, Iowa governor just released a statement, Governor Kim Reynolds, calling this, quote, "A sham indictment only serves as a reminder to Americans that there is a two-tier justice system under Joe Biden. While New York faces an open season for crime, the Manhattan DA is focused on arresting a former president. This is what an assault on democracy looks like, using government power to go after your political opponents, and it's coming directly from those who proclaim to defend it. This isn't normal, and it isn't justice, and it's certainly not what America stands for." Again, Governor Reynolds there giving her comment. I'm sure we'll see lots of Iowa Republicans giving their comment as well.
Well, there'll be a lot of buzz about this in the next week and over the next several months as all the campaigns start for the caucuses sometime early next year. What I'm concerned about a little bit is this takes the eye off the ball. What are the real issues that Americans are facing? We've got a porous border, Ukraine's struggling, China and the Middle East are some of the countries over there being very aggressive. Families are struggling with inflation, and now we're going to go into the mix of discussing a court case, good or bad, right or wrong, for a long time. I hope that at least the people in my party keep in mind that there are big issues that concern real voters and talk to those people about those issues.
We will continue to watch as the election unfolds and this historic news. David, thank you.
You're welcome.
And this is a historic move by the New York grand jury. This case stretches back to the final weeks of the 2016 presidential election and the $130,000 in hush money paid to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. That was confirmed by Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen in 2018, sparking an investigation. A year later, the New York District Attorney's Office subpoenaed the Trump Organization. That office requested 8 years of then-President Donald Trump's tax returns and his organization's as well. Shortly after, his legal team sued to protect those tax returns. And in 2020, that case made its way all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The justices in that case ruled the presidency did not shield the president from those inquiries. Jumping forward to 2022, the Trump Organization convicted of tax fraud and other crimes, but not the president himself. The grand jury behind today's indictment was formed a month later.